Hello and welcome to this special budget series on Rajya Sabha TV. I am Tina Jha and with me is my colleague Kriti Mishra. So in a few hours from now, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman will present the Union Budget 2021-22 in Parliament. Coming after over 10 months of hardship, this budget is going to be an all-important one. There are, of course, huge expectations as the country hopes to recover from the pandemic-induced economic shock. While some sectors have shown positive signs of recovery, there are still those that are struggling financially. Hopes also soar high for the common citizens for whom the year gone by has been really very difficult. Over the past few days, we have spoken about the expectations of different sectors from Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman, who in fact has stated that the union budget this time will be one the likes of which Indians have not seen in over 100 years. So on today's edition of our program, Budget of Hope, we will focus on Budget Blueprint, the experts' take. A distinguished panel of experts is joining us on the program, so let me introduce them to you first. We have with us on the show Mr. Jayant Dasgupta, former Secretary, Economic Advisory Council to the Prime Minister of India. Dr. Subhash Chandra Pandey, former Special Secretary and Financial Advisor, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Mr. Ashok Kumar Jha, former Secretary, Ministry of Finance. And Mr. Saurabh Chandra, Chairman MCX and former Secretary DIPP, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Welcome, gentlemen, on this special broadcast on Rajya Sabha TV. Mr. Jayant Dasgupta, let me begin the program today with you. Let's begin from what the Prime Minister said on the first day of the budget session, that after presenting about 3 to 4 mini budgets in the last year, the Finance Minister will be taking, in fact, what she presents in the Union Budget will be an extension of those mini budgets. So in that aspect, what, according to you, are some of the major expectations from the Union Budget that is set to be presented tomorrow in Parliament?
Now that we have got the pandemic somewhat under control and the supply of vaccines is also assured, the vaccination program has shown very good results in the past 15 days or so. So now is the time for us to focus on growth and recovery. And the emphasis would be on stimulating growth. And for that, it would, of course, need to be a sectoral approach. For instance, there are these industries which are the contact industries like travel, tourism, hospitality, entertainment, etc.,
yes,
which have taken the worst hit in the pandemic. So there would have to be impetus given to these industries to pick themselves up and start again on the process of recovery. There are some other industries which have not done so well. For instance, manufacturing is still down, and the industrial index of industrial production from October it showed a slight increase, but from November onwards, November and December, it again dipped. So there is a problem with that. And then the larger issue of the MSMEs, especially the services industry, which accounts for between 55 to 60% of our GDP, that is the worst hit overall. And if you look at the employment figures in December were around, unemployment was around 9%. Of course, in January, it has shown a slight improvement. But it is true that there are large numbers of people who were employed, gainfully employed before the pandemic struck, and now they have been thrown out of employment. So providing them with a livelihood, with employment would be another focus area. So in short, I would like to say that reviving the economy through fiscal stimulus, through sector-based approaches, especially focusing on the MSMEs, the services sector amongst the MSMEs in particular, and providing employment. These would be the priority areas for the government in the budget.
That's right, Kriti. So, revival of various sectors, especially the stressed ones, and also meeting the expectations of the general public are two expectations, two major ones that Mr. Jayant Dasgupta is pointing forward.
बिल्कुल टीना, आपने सही कहा। जिस तरह से फोकस रहा है हर सेक्टर पर, लगातार हम ये बात करते आए हैं कि क्या एक्सपेक्टेशंस हैं, किस तरह की उम्मीदें हैं। सौरभ चंद्रा जी, आपके पास आना चाहूंगी। कहा जा रहा है कि ये जो बजट होगा वो ऐतिहासिक होगा। सरकार ने कई बार कहा है कि आपदा को अवसर में बदलना है। इसके अलावा सरकार का मंत्रा ये भी रहा है कि मेंटेनिंग लाइव्स एंड लाइवलीहुड्स। ऐसे में वित्त मंत्री निर्मला सीतारमण के सामने क्या चैलेंजेस और क्या अपॉर्चुनिटीज?
सबसे पहली जो चुनौती उनके सामने है वो जीडीपी को बढ़ाना है। आज जो जीडीपी की हमें उम्मीद है वो पिछले साल से कम 7-8% कम होगी। तो जो जीडीपी 31 मार्च 2020 को थी वो कम से कम हमें 2022 31 मार्च तक वहां तक पहुंचना है। उसके लिए रियल टर्म्स में कम से कम 8-9% की बढ़त चाहिए, यानी नॉमिनल टर्म में 13-14% की बढ़त चाहिए। जो जयंत दासगुप्ता साहब ने कहा उसके अतिरिक्त कुछ सेक्टर्स हैं जिन पे बहुत ज्यादा ध्यान देना पड़ेगा। एक कंस्ट्रक्शन है, नेशनल इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की जो पाइपलाइन है उससे नौकरी बनेगी। मैन्युफैक्चरिंग हमारी 15-16% लगभग 3 दशक से है। इसका जो अंशदान है जीडीपी में उसको बढ़ाना है। पीएलआई स्कीम आई है। चैलेंज ये है कि उसको एग्जीक्यूट कैसे किया जाए, जमीन पर उसको कारगर होना है। उसके लिए हमें एग्जीक्यूशन कैपेसिटी बढ़ानी है। देखिए, आंकड़े मोटे मोटे मालूम है मैं बजट में क्या आएंगे। बहुत दिनों से अटकलें चल रही हैं। एक्सपेंडिचर लगभग 31-32 लाख करोड़ होगा, रेवेन्यू 20-21 लाख करोड़ होगा, फिस्कल डेफिसिट 11 लाख करोड़ यानी जीडीपी की 5.5% होगी। अब उसमें ये प्रश्न है, जो फिस्कल डेफिसिट है, जो आप लोन रेज कर रहे हैं, उसका उपयोग कैसे करते हैं, क्योंकि लोन वापस करना है। तो उसमें से कितना ऐसी एसेट क्रिएशन में जाएगी जो बाद में इनकम जनरेट करेगी और आपको वापस देगी। ये बहुत जरूरी चीजें हैं जिन पे ध्यान देना पड़ेगा।
जी बिल्कुल। तो फोकस आपने जैसा कि कहा कि जीडीपी ग्रोथ पर होना है, और हमने देखा है कि किस तरह से आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण में भी बात कही गई है वी शेप रिकवरी की, किस तरह से आगे इस ग्रोथ को बढ़ाना है। और टीना, आईएमएफ ने भी कहीं ना कहीं ये उम्मीद जताई है कि जिस तरह से 11% की ग्रोथ आगे भारत को देखने को मिल सकती है, ऐसे में क्या होगा रास्ता वित्त मंत्री के लिए?
That's right. Mr. S.C. Pandey, let me come to you. When we talk about GDP growth, what is it that the government must do so as to drive fast economic growth, which also is sustainable?
You see, one of the hallmark of the current economic situation is that it is very fast developing situation. We just mentioned about International Monetary Fund forecast. Only in October, they had projected that the current year India will have a decline of 10.5%, and next year it will have a growth of 8.8%. Only recently, in less than 4 months' time, they have revised it upward by 3 to 4%, saying that it will be 8% down this year and 11.5%. And the way things have been moving up rapidly since October, I would not be surprised if we prove IMF wrong again after a quarter and catch up with this thing. The catch-up game is going on, and we find that the biggest indicator is the GST collection. 115,000 crore is the highest monthly collection since July 2017 when GST was launched. So, and this is when the full economy is not opened up. Only now we are beginning to, the contact industries will begin to open up. So, I would see a ramp up of this further, and we would achieve pre-COVID level in the middle of next year and move ahead with at least 3 to 5% growth by the time the year ends. Of course, the balance between consumption and investment, as you know, our economy is a consumption driven economy, and consumption has taken a hit during the pandemic. but in a very prudent macroeconomic management, learning from the mistakes made in previous post-crisis interventions. The government has resisted the temptation of going fiscally expansive early in the stage of pandemic and focused mostly on relief, so that through manufacturing and infrastructure, we boost the productive capacity of the economy to create jobs in long term and not create permanent entitlements which should actually be peter off after the crisis subsides. So this combination, I share that the national infrastructure pipeline, 100 lakh crore with the 40% center, 40% state and 20% private, that is in next 5 years gives a big stimulus. And if we are borrowing for asset creation, if we are giving production link incentive, say 2 lakh crore, it means 40 lakh crore worth of production if we give 5% PLI. So this is the way to create sustainable growth, fiscally responsible growth, and as Honorable Prime Minister said, this budget is not going to be that big bang in that sense. It is a continuation. We have had many smaller big bangs. The 20 lakh crore itself has infused such a liquidity, and that is going to be tapped through higher fiscal deficit, certainly. And which is what it should be. And this is not the time to worry about fiscal deficit.
So it's going to be sort of an extension of the 3-4 mini budgets that the Prime Minister pointed out, and that's why the expectations have to be in line with what has already been done in the past year, Kriti.
Absolutely. Mr. Pandey was talking about fiscal prudence, Tina. And at this juncture, I'm reminded about taxation. Of course, the government has been saying that economic growth cannot wait, fiscal deficit can wait, something that was reiterated by Mr. Pandey as well. Mr. Ashok Kumar Jha, coming to you. We've been talking about the way ahead for the government as far as taxation is concerned. Now, the focus is on individual taxpayers, on corporate taxation, but also there are worries about fiscal headroom. How will the government ensure that there's disposable income, there's saving, there's demand, and then, of course, the cycle of investment, production, and income generation?
Yeah, I think before I answer your question, I would like to emphasize that the budget should really be focused very strongly on employment generation. The reason I'm saying this is that, as CMI estimates, there were about 122 million people who were unemployed in April 2020. It now was reduced drastically to about 15 million or so. But the important point here is that the quality of the job, in fact, there is a lot of anecdotal evidence to support the view that even though people have got back their jobs, they're not got it back in the same kind of payment regime in terms of they have to take a cut in their salary and so on. So therefore, the most important, I would think that the most important part of the budget will be focusing on employment. One of the panelists mentioned about construction. Along with construction, I would probably add garments, textiles, gems and jewelry, leather products. These are all employment generating sectors, and there should be a lot of focus on this. Now, coming to the that you asked about, from where the money is going to come. Well, there are the adding taxes. The people, I think, is going to be very productive because the need of the hour is to stimulate demand. So most, in my view, the way to garner resources is to basically focus on 2-3 things. One is that we focus on strategic disinvestment. See, the last years we have done very little of disinvestment, even though we have got good targets. So strategic disinvestment, by this I mean that you don't sell just a few percentage of shares of public sector undertaking. You sell substantially the shares of public sector undertaking so that...
Absolutely, sir. The government has to focus on non-tax revenue. And for that, of course, we are expecting clarity on the PSE policy, and the way ahead is disinvestment, Tina.
Definitely. Also, Mr. Jain Das Gupta, when we talk about the expectations from the budget, the general view in the run-up to the budget this year has been that the finance minister must rely on generous public spending in order to spur activity, also put more money into the hands of the taxpayer so that, there is boost to consumption. So in that regard, what can the government do to promote household investment?
This year, in the past few months, we have seen our gross investment plummet to about 27%, which is one of the lowest in years. So that is a major issue. Now, as far as the government spending is concerned, there are two ways of looking at it. One is about providing relief. Now, that is the phase which took place in the first 6 months or 8 months of the pandemic, by which free food grains, for instance, were given to about 80 crore people. Then about 42 crore individuals, they had the direct benefit transfer of cash, including 20 crore women under the Jan Dhan Yojana scheme. Now, all that is past. We have to, of course, see that nobody suffers from hunger. There is gainful employment to the extent possible through government schemes. That is, for instance, in the rural areas, already about 130,000 crores has been spent under the Manrega scheme. Now, coming to the present juncture, the issue is to create durable assets, as Mr. Saurabh Chandra had been pointing out, and that is of a piece with this India Infrastructure Pipeline project. Durable assets which will not only create employment immediately, but also stand us in good stead in boosting our growth over the next 2 years, 3 years, and in the longer term. So the quality of the assets will matter a lot.
Yes.
And that is what we have to focus on, and the government has to focus on. That one is, of course, preventing people from suffering unnecessarily in terms of food, in terms of health care, in terms of livelihoods. And two, spending money in a wise fashion. And of course, I think this is not the time, and the Chief Economic Advisor has also been expounding on this, that this is a counter-cyclical time for counter-cyclical policy, that when the government needs to step in because private investment is not going to be up to the mark. And that is where the government will have to step in with its investment infrastructure spending and in infrastructure spending. And that is what will propel growth.
Definitely. So wiseful spending is something that the government must look at in this unprecedented, extraordinary situation that we are in, Kriti.
Well, absolutely, Tina. चलिए अब आगे बात करते हैं कि सेक्टर की, हर सेक्टर की क्या डिमांड है, और सबसे पहले शुरुआत करते हैं कृषि क्षेत्र से।
बिल्कुल।
सौरभ चंद्रा जी, आपके पास आना चाहूंगी। हमने देखा है कि किस तरह से कृषि क्षेत्र में जो नए रिफॉर्म्स लाई है सरकार, उसका क्या असर होगा, इस पर लगातार बातें हो रही हैं। इसके अलावा हमने ये भी देखा कि आर्थिक सर्वेक्षण में कैसे बोला गया है कि कृषि क्षेत्र जो रहा है वो कुशन रहा है, एक ब्राइट स्पॉट रहा है। राष्ट्रपति का जो अभिभाषण था उसमें भी कहा गया कि आत्मनिर्भर भारत का फोकस फार्म सेक्टर पर सबसे ज्यादा रहेगा। ऐसे में कृषि क्षेत्र के लिए क्या उम्मीदें?
देखिए, कृषि क्षेत्र में सबसे जो बड़ी जरूरत है वो ये है कि जो जितनी जनसंख्या उस पर निर्भर है उसको कम करना है। जीडीपी का 15%, 50% जनसंख्या को सपोर्ट नहीं कर सकता है। इसके लिए आवश्यक ये है कि पॉपुलेशन ट्रांसफर की जाए। बेसिकली मैन्युफैक्चरिंग सेक्टर ही इसको अब्सॉर्ब कर सकता है, तो मैन्युफैक्चरिंग ग्रोथ इसके लिए जरूरी, पहली चीज। दूसरी चीज, हम जो इस समय गेहूं धान इकोनॉमी में है, अब क्या समस्या उत्पन्न हो गई? जो प्रोडक्शन है वो देश के कंजम्पशन से ज्यादा है। सरप्लस हम एक्सपोर्ट नहीं कर सकते क्योंकि विदेश में दाम कम है, और जो कंजम्पशन है उसका एक अंश ही प्रोक्योर हो पाता है, बाकी मार्केट में बिकता है। तो उसकी जो समस्या है वो इनकम की है। और इनकम बढ़ाने के लिए ये जरूरी है कि ये जो गेहूं और धान का है इसको परिवर्तित करके जो चीज हम आयातित कर रहे हैं, ऑयल सीड्स है, पल्सेस है, इसकी तरफ हमें इंसेंटिवाइज किया जाए। जिस चीज को आप इंसेंटिवाइज करेंगे वो होगा। कृषि क्षेत्र की समस्या ये दो है, एक तो जनसंख्या जो उस पर निर्भर है उसको कम करना है, दूसरा डाइवर्सिफिकेशन करना है। इसके लिए बजट में इंसेंटिव्स आने चाहिए। इसके अलावा जो समस्या है वो इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर की है, एक्सटेंशन की है, साइंटिफिक, आजकल जिस तरह से डिजिटल इकोनॉमी है, बहुत कुछ शिक्षा हम उसके माध्यम से दे सकते हैं। तो एक्सटेंशन हो गया, आपका इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर हो गया, और अगर रेगुलेटरी बर्डन कहीं है उसको जरा कम करना है। जैसे अगर वो पेड़ वगैरह उगाते हैं तो आप काट सकते हैं, उसको ट्रांसपोर्ट नहीं कर सकते, उसके लिए परमिट चाहिए। तो इस तरह की जो छोटी मोटी तकलीफें हैं उनको दूर किया जाए तो इस क्षेत्र में जो इनकम का लक्ष्य है बढ़ाने का वो बहुत हद तक प्राप्त हो।
जी बिल्कुल, तो बहुत संभावनाएं हैं इस क्षेत्र के लिए। टीना, आगे चल के और किन किन क्षेत्रों पर फोकस रहेगा?
I think, Kriti, another crucial sector that will require a lot of attention this time is going to be healthcare. Mr. Jayant Das Gupta, let me come back to you again and understand the central takeaway from this COVID pandemic has been that we have to strengthen our healthcare. For a country of India's size and GDP, there is no doubt we are spending abysmally low on this particular sector. Now, according to you, we've been through this once in a century pandemic. We are still reeling under the impact of this unprecedented pandemic. Can we expect a leap in the healthcare budget as far as tomorrow's budget is concerned?
Yes, definitely. I think from a level of around 1.5 to 1.75%, it has to go up. Now, whether we try to take it up to 2.5 to 3%, which is a kind of an ideal target for us in 1 year, because there is a problem of absorption capacity and execution of the programs also, which comes with an increased budgetary outlay. So we have to be prudent in that. But there are many innovations, and I think the JAM, Aadhaar, Mobile and Jan Dhan Yojana, these things have pointed to the direction in which we can take our healthcare. For instance, we have about 9 lakh ASHA workers, who are, many of them are 10th standard pass outs, and many of them are even graduates. Now, we can train them to provide primary health care, and for that, using digital technology and telemedicine, and again, blockchain technology, these things will be very, very important. And this will not only lead to less pressure, for instance, on the secondary and tertiary healthcare facilities, but it will also improve the incomes of people. It will reduce the sufferings of people, because they don't have to travel over 10, 15, maybe 50 kilometers to go to see the nearest doctor. So healthcare expenditure has to be scaled up, whether we do it over 2 years or 3 years, to about 2.5 to 3% of GDP. That is what we need to do. And the infrastructure, of course, the hard infrastructure has to be created, but it is extremely important to also build up our soft skills. And in this regard, the ASHA workers will be a very valuable asset, whom we have to train and upskill them, and then so that, because they are living in the community, and they are in very close contact with the community. So that is, and they can provide healthcare, primary healthcare facilities at the doorstep.
And this is something, that even the economic survey talks about. Another thing, before we move to another sector, Kriti, I want to ask Mr. Das Gupta is that, the economic survey talks about regulating the private healthcare sector in our country. Do you believe the government could delve into this particular area this time?
It is an ideal situation that when about 2/3 of the healthcare that is being provided in the country is by private sources. And the private sources, unfortunately, and it is part of our evolution, they are not very strictly regulated. whether the kind of ethics that the medical professionals have to abide by, the kind of other checks and balances which we have to build into the system. That is something which, again, can't be done in a very short span of time. It will take time, but we have to have a roadmap for that.
Yes.
Let us then draw up a roadmap that, all right, this is the kind of thing which we will do. And I think one of the very important developments in this regard is the rolling out of the Ayushman Bharat scheme. Because there a lot of, I think, thought has gone into it, and it has started showing very positive results. So regulation has already, because Ayushman Bharat is a kind of an insurance scheme, and there are caps on the kind of spending which would be eligible for reimbursement. So it has already started, but then the larger, much broader question of ethics amongst the medical professionals and the healthcare institutions which are in the private sector, that also needs to be enforced, not only for Ayushman Bharat, but for the public at large.
Absolutely.
बिल्कुल टीना, आगे बढ़ते हैं और दूसरे बेहद अहम क्षेत्र के बारे में बात करते हैं, विनिर्माण क्षेत्र या फिर हम कहें मैन्युफैक्चरिंग। सुभाष पांडे जी, आपके पास आना चाहूँगी। देखिए, सरकार का फोकस रहा है कि मैन्युफैक्चरिंग का जो कंट्रीब्यूशन है जीडीपी में, उसको बढ़ाकर 25% तक कर दिया जाए 2025 तक। पीएलआई स्कीम भी देखा हमने, सरकार का लगातार फोकस आत्मनिर्भर भारत पर भी रहा है, मेक इन इंडिया, मेक फॉर इंडिया। ऐसे में बजट में क्या उम्मीदें हैं भारत को मैन्युफैक्चरिंग हब बनाने के लिए?
As in terms of manufacturing promotion, a lot of groundwork has already been done, and in the budget itself, I would not look forward to in terms of budgetary outlays or something. A lot of work is required in terms of a deregulation. The regulatory cholesterol is still jamming the arteries. The cross-border subsidies burden is very high. So if some reforms on those sides, say railway passenger freight fare cross-subsidization, industrial and household agricultural power consumer cross-subsidization, these are the pain points. Logistics is the pain points, cost of capital is the pain point. So those more than the budget allocations, these are the deregulations that are required to boost manufacturing. 16% has been a secular trend for more than 2-3 decades, and to move the needle even to 20%, it will be very, very massive effort. But I am pinning hopes on the PLI as well as combination of corporation tax cuts announced for new manufacturing units that have to come roll out soon within the applicable deadline. As I said, 2 lakh crore is the estimated outgo on PLI. So if we assume a 5% incentive, that means with 2 lakh, you are trying to leverage 40 lakh crore worth of production. So this is for the next 5 years. In many sectors, the 5% incentive average may not be enough. Higher incentive may be required, especially when we are looking for high technology areas, e-mobility, battery manufacturing, and in several areas of digital economy. Just recently, NASSCAM assessed that today $300 billion is the digital economy size, and by 2025 it is likely to go to 1 trillion. And this, why it is important that the overall process of digitalization and formalization is giving us rich dividends in many areas, including in governance, like tax compliance improvement. So merely looking at enhanced budget allocation may not be the right approach, rather looking for more bang from the buck using the digital economy. And whether it is healthcare, edtech, fintech, we are seeing how the digital technology is reducing the cost of delivery, unit cost of delivery of services, improving outcomes, reducing inefficiencies and corruption in the system. And with that approach, even though in nominal terms the budget allocations don't go that high, the outcomes can certainly be far superior than that have been any time in the past.
पांडे जी, आपने रेगुलेटरी कोलेस्ट्रॉल की बात कही, ये पॉइंट मैं सौरभ चंद्रा जी के पास ले जाना चाहूंगी। सर, लगातार ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में हमने बढ़ोतरी की है, वो इंडेक्स में लगातार हमारा इंप्रूवमेंट हुआ है। अब फोकस है टॉप 50 देशों में आने का, लेकिन फिर भी रेगुलेटरी जो कोलेस्ट्रॉल की लगातार इंडस्ट्री भी बात करती आई है, आगे ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस के लिए क्या कदम उठा सकती है सरकार? इसमें एक बहुत बड़ा पॉइंट है पॉलिसी कंसिस्टेंसी का, कि किस तरह से जो पॉलिसीज आती हैं और खासकर राज्यों की भूमिका इसमें बेहद अहम हो जाती है। तो क्या कुछ ऐसे कदम हो सकते हैं?
देखिए, ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस जो है उसके बाहर भी बहुत समस्याएं हैं। ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में सारे पैरामीटर्स कैप्चर नहीं होते हैं। उदाहरणतः लेबर उसमें नहीं, इसके अलावा लॉ एंड ऑर्डर उसमें नहीं, उसमें कॉस्ट ऑफ क्रेडिट नहीं। इस तरह की बिजली कितने दिन में मिलती है ये जरूर है, मगर बिजली आती है नहीं आती है, उसकी क्वालिटी कैसी है, ये उसमें नहीं है। ये सब इंडस्ट्री को अफेक्ट करती है। जिस दिन हमें ग्रिड इलेक्ट्रिसिटी निरंतर मिलती रहेगी, डीजल जनरेटर पे आपको उत्पादन नहीं करना पड़ेगा, उस दिन कॉस्ट ऑफ प्रोडक्शन अपने आप घट जाएगी। बेसिक समस्या क्या है? आप कंपेटिटिव नहीं है इंटरनेशनल मार्केट में। आप कैसे कंपेटिटिव होंगे? देखिए, मैन्युफैक्चरिंग स्टेट सब्जेक्ट है, कुछ एक्सेप्शंस को छोड़ के, पहली चीज। दूसरी चीज, फैक्टर रिफॉर्म्स की बात की गई है। लैंड, लेबर, कैपिटल, काफी बात की गई है। वो रिफॉर्म्स में जो भी अभी कमियां हैं वो पूरी होनी है। ये सब बजट में नहीं आएगा। इसके अलावा इनेबलर्स हैं। रेगुलेटरी एनवायरनमेंट एक इनेबलर है, इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर दूसरा इनेबलर है, लॉजिस्टिक्स है, कितने दिन में आपका सामान पोर्ट में पहुंचता है, वहां टर्न अराउंड टाइम क्या है। ये सब बहुत महत्वपूर्ण चीजें हैं जो कैप्चर ईज ऑफ डूइंग बिजनेस में नहीं होती। ये सब चीजें के लिए एक अलग इंडेक्स बनाई गई है और उसके लिए डीआईपीपी ने काम किया है। उससे फर्क जरूर आया है और उम्मीद है कि भविष्य में और आएगा।
All right. So, Kriti, we've spoken about agriculture, we've spoken about health sector, also manufacturing. Another key area which I believe the government must focus also on this time is education. Because apart from the physical health of people, this has been one sector which has had long-term adverse impact due to COVID-19 pandemic, and that has, disrupted the educational attainment process of children. So, Mr. Ashok Kumar Jha, let me pose a question on the education sector, the expectations that this particular sector has this time, because it has been one of the hardest hit sectors this time. And the pandemic has sort of also deepened the digital divide in the country. So the process of, teaching and learning sort of got disrupted when the pandemic hit the country. So what can be done by the government to cover up for the losses? At the same time, to promote the edutech industry in particular that has played a very, very crucial role during these tough times?
Yeah, actually, you have chosen a very important sector for discussions, because the pandemic has really deepened this the digital divide between the haves and the have-nots. It is very, very important for the government to step in and provide some stimulus to the poorer sections of society so that they can be at par in terms of receiving the benefits of education through schooling, etc., which has now been online for almost a year. The overall budgetary support for education is much less than what is desirable. The important point here, of course, is that education also is a state subject. It's not really a subject for the center, but the central government can give certain directions, certain create certain environment for the states also to function and to boost the outlay on education. Here, the important point is that the states need to be empowered, and the empowerment of the states, we have to be very careful to ensure that the money that should go to the states overall is not cut back. Because after all, overall, if you look at the budgets of the states and the center, the state governments spend about 60% of the total budgets of center and states combined. So therefore, they have a very important role to play in terms of revival of the economy, including in terms of the outlay for education. Now, if we look at, say, the increase in cesses and surcharges in the last few years, the cesses and surcharges which are not shared with the state governments, they have ballooned. They have, in fact, almost doubled over the last 4 or 5 years. And so we need to be mindful of that these cesses and surcharges are not increased inordinately. The other aspect is, again, what was one of the terms of reference that was put in the 15th Finance Commission's terms of reference, which was that they were asked to look at a mechanism for essentially carving out the outlays for defense and internal security. Now, if this is carved out from the divisible pool of resources, then again we've got a problem, because then the state governments will get less money and less money for state governments means that less money for all sectors, including education. So I think we have to be careful when we look at all the sectors, including education, because ultimately these expenditures on health, education, etc., bulk of it is done by the state governments.
That's right, Kriti. And the new education policy also talks about higher budgetary allocation for the education sector. So how and when it's done, that is something that we'll have to wait for the government to actually decide on it.
All right, Tina, another key sector that I'd like to touch upon would be exports. Now, Mr. Jain Das Gupta, we had the meeting of the Parliamentary Consultative Committee on the new foreign trade policy. We'll have the new foreign trade policy on 1st of April that would be unveiled by Government of India. But there's another important aspect, which is of the WTO. Now, at the 7th Trade Policy Review, the members of the WTO did take notice of a lot of schemes of Government of India like Digital India, Startup India, Skill India, and integration of these schemes into global supply chains. They welcomed these initiatives, but also expressed concerns about possible trade restrictions. So, Budget 2021 and exports, the way ahead.
I think the point needs to be clarified that the foreign trade policy, which is likely to roll out from the 1st of April this year, it is not directly related to the budget exercise. In fact, apart from, raising customs tariffs or lowering customs tariffs for certain items during the budget session, the import-export business, apart from incentives which could be announced as part of a new scheme, the budget does not really include much for exports and imports. I would like to emphasize here that a lot of things which are required for the ease of doing business and for reducing the transaction costs for exporters and importers, they have to be undertaken both by the central government, but a lot of it has to be done by the state governments. And Mr. Saurabh Chandra mentioned the things, and Dr. Pandey also mentioned about electricity, for instance. If you are producing something for exports, let's say fabric in a mill, and you are paying 7.5 rupees per unit of electricity, and it is actually on account of the cross-subsidization with, let's say, domestic consumers and agriculture, that it is costing you 7.5 rupees. Now, in many of our major competitors like China, it is provided at 3.5 rupees to 4 rupees. So how can you compete when, let's say, the cost of electricity accounts for about 10 or 15% of the production cost of a particular item? Therein, and there are other factors also. In the ease of doing business, for instance, land registration, we are ranked currently in the 130s amongst countries. Dispute settlement, if a dispute lingers on for very long, it costs money. So these are the kind of things which will have to be done, and they don't have a direct relationship with the budget. They'll have to be done on a time-bound basis according to a roadmap, but we must get our own act together within the next 2 years or so, because otherwise we will keep falling behind, lagging behind. So this is as far as this aspect is concerned. On the WTO has mentioned in a laudatory manner, the members have mentioned, in various schemes which India has undertaken. But the concern has been expressed about, for instance, the raising of import tariffs on various products over the past few years. And the large number of, for instance, dispute cases which have been filed against India for a variety of products. For instance, solar panel, it was about 4 years ago. Then on electronic products, which is part of our overall scheme to provide a stimulus to have local production of most of the items that we import in large quantities, and our import bill is going to go up. So these are the kind of things which have been raised by the WTO members. But if you look at it in perspective, most countries which are today ahead on the growth curve of exports or industrialization, they have utilized many of the policies that we are adopting now or following now. So it is a moot point, and there is a famous book by a Cambridge economist called Kicking Away the Ladder, that you climb up the tree by using certain policies, and then you kick away the ladder and object to other countries following the same route. So we have to be pragmatic. We can't be a closed economy. We have to be open, because the Prime Minister has announced, even most recently at the Davos Forum, that getting onto the global value chain, becoming an integral part of the global value chain, is very important for us. Exporting is important for us, and imports are also important for us. So it is not that we are going to be inward looking, but there may be temporary measures may be required to give a boost to economy. For instance, the production linked incentive scheme, which is a wonderful scheme, does not have any export connotation that you have to export so much, otherwise you will not get it, because that would make it WTO inconsistent. But we have to see how the schemes get rolled out. The PLI covers about 10 sectors and 200,000 crore of incentives. So we have to see how it gets rolled out. The first thing we need to remember is that we must boost our manufacturing. We must give incentives which are WTO consistent to our manufacturers, to our small scale industries, medium industries, because they are the backbone of our exports. And then we move forward.
And I think another thing that's very, very important for India, Kriti, is to, make the country an attractive investment destination as well. That's something that the Prime Minister keeps talking about. In that regard, Mr. Saurabh Chandra, there have been demands that the government must reconsider the LTCG tax on the listed equities. Do you think the government is going to consider it in this union budget?
It's very difficult to second guess this, but the long-term capital gains tax has had some dampening effect according to most surveys.
Yes.
Very difficult, but certain incentives have to be provided to bring in investment. And I just want to add to what Mr. Jayant Dasgupta said about exports. You see, if you were to look at the economies which have the largest trade surpluses in the world, they fall in two categories. One are crude oil exporting countries, and the other are all manufacturing giants. China, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Germany. For that, you need depth in manufacturing. What is the value that is added within your country? And the other way that has been mentioned by Mr. Jayant Dasgupta is to get onto global value chains. We have to become a part of that. That is where we need competitiveness. Now, coming back to the taxation part of it, we need to build in incentives. Incentives, for example, you need investment if you have to grow at a certain percentage. Now, simple way is to channelize domestic savings, increase the limits under ATC, which have been stagnant for many years, bring in some kind of tax-free bonds. You see, the banking system is something which we need to look at. There is a crisis there. And the crisis is because of an asset liability mismatch. For that, we need a vibrant bond market. How do we create a vibrant bond market? These are some of the things which, in my opinion, and I believe that the budget would be looking at. You're talking about development finance.
तरह की उम्मीदें, क्या कुछ स्कीम्स, क्या कुछ मेजर्स हो सकते हैं इस बार के बजट में?
इसमें पहला, the first thing is that the NPAs of banks, particularly those of the public sector banks, are extremely high. The recent RBI report indicated that the NPAs by next September will be more than 14.5%. And if you look at only the public sector banks, it will probably be around 17%. So the only way of getting over this problem, because if the NPAs are high, it means that the banks will not be able to do their legitimate business of lending. So the only way of going around this problem is we have to then recapitalize the banks.
Yes.
But that is just to take care of the problem. Essentially, what is required to be done is that you have to have a proper system of due diligence in the public sector banks so that their lending programs are such that they do not result in NPAs. The second point here is that because there is the lack of demand for funds at the moment because the economy was slowed down, etc. So because of lack of demand for funds, the banks are, even if they have the money, they are not able to lend. They have parked it in the RBI under the reverse repo mechanism. So it's all sort of tied up together in the sense that you have to generate the demand, then the banks will lend, but the banks must lend properly, not in terms of the kind of reckless lending or directed lending that is happening at times. For instance, now the Mudra loans, one of the reports, recent reports of State Bank of India indicated that there is a very high level of NPAs that are going to crop up in the Mudra loans, which are basically loans given to the smaller manufacturing entities. So I think by and large, the entire public sector banking system needs a complete revamp. The government has tried to do that in terms of amalgamation of many banks into a smaller number of banks. But I think it will require much more than just amalgamation. And in this connection, this talk recently about the bad bank, since the NPAs are very high, so there is a feeling that we should go in for a bad bank kind of system, to which all the NPAs will be transferred and the banks will then start afresh on a new slate. I, for one, think that it is a very good idea because it is only then you're only kicking the can down the road without trying to solve the problem of why the NPAs arose and as to how you should try to prevent the NPAs from arising in future.
जी बिल्कुल, तो लगातार फोकस रहा है किस तरह से एनपीए जो है उसका क्लीन अप साइकिल हो। पहले भी हम कैपिटल इन्फ्यूजन देख चुके हैं, लेकिन अब बैड बैंक की बात है, देखना है किस तरह का अनाउंसमेंट हो सकता है बजट में। टीना?
That's right, Kriti. So we've spoken about, various sectors. I think it's only fair that before winding up the program, we also talk about women and youth in particular. Because for the youth, when we speak, unemployment for them has been a long-standing issue even before the pandemic. And now, with the pandemic setting in, a number of youth have sort of lost their jobs during the pandemic, during these tough times. In fact, I was reading somewhere that it reached 7.8% in November 2020, and the youth unemployment out of this constituted of more than 20%. Also, if we talk about working women, the women workforce as well has been hit the hardest, with 13.9% job losses in April 2020 alone. So let me take that question to Mr. Subhash Chandra Pandey. When we talk about women and youth in particular and creating employment for them, for the women workforce, those who have lost their job during the pandemic, to get them back to, sort of create an equitable environment at workplaces, what should the government be doing? What should the government's thrust be?
पांडे जी, टीना ने एक बात कही और एक बात और मैं ऐड करना चाहूंगी। जैसे युवाओं की बात कही है, सरकार लगातार कहती आई है कि जॉब सीकर ना बने, जॉब गिवर बने। स्टार्टअप्स पर काफी फोकस रहा है, 1000 करोड़ का एक फंड बनाने की भी बात कही है। तो युवाओं के परिप्रेक्ष्य में एक स्टार्टअप पर भी आपका क्या फोकस रहेगा? आपको क्या लगता है किस तरह से वित्त मंत्री इनके लिए आगे रास्ता बताएंगे?
The issue of unemployment has been a subject of the faulty measurement of what we call employed or unemployed. Even in the past, the rates that we have seen, there is a huge concealed or hidden unemployment or low-level employment being categorized as employed, casually employed, seasonally employed. So the size of the problem is so huge that, frankly speaking, there are no ready answers in the short term. And that is why it is important to build the productive capacity. As Mr. Jha also pointed out, Mr. Saurabh Chandra pointed out, how to move such a large population dependent on the rural economy, on a small share of 15% cannot support 50% of GDP. So to move out, to create service sector, give a further fillip to digital economy, and to boost manufacturing, to create high quality, higher paying jobs. And that is the agenda for the future, for the medium term, on which various sectoral reforms are being taken. So the short and remedy of giving any short term relief, that period will probably taper off as the pandemic effect tapers off. So we have to look for enduring opportunities, and there the Startup India program holds a very good potential. Last year, during the pandemic period, when everything we were getting a lot of negative news and very on different fronts, this ecosystem created largest number of unicorns in the country. Now there are 38 unicorns India-based. So and this potential can grow because you have edtech, fintech, healthcare tech, agri-tech, and also a lot of them, 20-30% of them are now in a good news. They are deploying deep technology, artificial intelligence, robotics, Internet of Things, and this it is the latent demand that is waiting to be met, because the supplier of demand and the person who needs or whose need can be created, they are not connected. The digital economy, a lot of this digital economy is creating that additional demand, additional headroom that we all are looking forward to. Additional demand means additional jobs, additional production. So the additional demand will come only when you can connect the person who has the demand or who can be encouraged to pose the demand, and the person who can meet the demand. A lot of systemic inefficiencies across sectors are there where the two are unconnected, and information asymmetry has suppressed the overall production level. So I'm very hopeful that the startup ecosystem and digital economy will not just displace brick and mortar economy in parts, in certain sectors, but overall it will create much more demand than it will dent negatively. And that is where the salvation lies for our demography, where we have 65% under 35. Yes. And also this is what we need to have investment promotion. So for the largest digitally connected economy, that is the attention the world is giving in terms of giving record FDI. And talking of the connected problem of capital, you have either equity capital or debt capital. Over a period of time, we have given too much emphasis to the debt capital and focused on banks, NPAs, but today we have a situation where countries' top corporates can hope to attract equity from abroad and retire debt, become debt free. And this is a replacement of debt by equity can happen in many sectors, provided the right policies are there, the capital is encouraged, protected. Wherever there is a need, there is a fair and fast exit provided, and a balance has to be made for the equity investor and debt investor. We have been far too long been guided by credit rating agencies, even when Government of India has been the external borrowing has been very, very low, not even 3% of the total
And
borrowing.
that's something that the
And,
economic survey has also
that-
spoken about in detail, Kriti. In fact, an entire chapter has been
Yes.
dedicated to the sovereign credit rating as far as India is concerned. So, you know, we've spoken about all sectors, the huge expectations that they have from the budget this time. But the question is, with so many challenges abound, how far will Nirmala Sitharaman be able to loosen her purse strings is something that we'll have to wait and watch out for. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us on the program and sharing your perspective with us and with our viewers as well. Pleasure having you on the program. So that's it from us on this edition of our special Budget of Hope program. See you again next time. It's a goodbye from me and Kriti.